Today on the podcast, we are bringing you some very interesting AI news out of Apple, or perhaps lack thereof. As you may know, the iPhone 15 and the Apple Watch Series 9 was just announced at Apple's big, unveiling event that they do once a year for the iPhone. And there was a lot of people that had a lot of things to say about AI and Apple. So we're going to dive into all of that on the podcast today. Welcome to the AI Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Jaden Schaefer. I need to ask you for a big favor. Believe it or not, we have around 92,000 people that listen to this podcast every month, which is absolutely amazing. But when you go to our Apple Podcast or Spotify pages, we only have around 110 reviews total. If you could do me a massive favor and give this podcast a review, I would be super, super grateful. Every time I contact an incredible founder or CEO in AI, they look at the podcast, they look at how many reviews I have, and that helps me to get better guests on the show. So if you could do a huge favor to myself and also yourself, go to the Apple Podcast or the Spotify page, wherever you listen to this, and give a review of the show. If you've noticed lately, I've been doing interviews with some really phenomenal CEOs. I have some more amazing ones coming up in the coming weeks with some CEOs that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars for their AI startups. I want to bring these to you and I want to get more of those. So please drop a review, go to your wife's account, go to your husband's account, go to your kid's account and leave a review. I don't care. Help us get more reviews, and I promise I will help bring some amazing AI entrepreneurs and guests onto the show. Have you ever wanted to start your own podcast? I record and publish podcasts on a platform called Spotify for Podcasters, and I absolutely love it. Essentially, you can upload from your phone or computer, and it distributes to every platform that plays podcasts. They support video podcasts, and you can make money on the platform with ads or even podcast subscriptions, something that has made my life so much easier as a podcaster. So if you're interested, I highly recommend you give it a try. You can download the Spotify for Podcast app or go to spotify.com/podcasters to get started on your podcast today. As you may know, at Apple's recent unveiling of the iPhone 15 and Apple Watch Series 9, the tech behemoth put a spotlight on the advanced capabilities of its in-house designed semiconductors, though they curiously avoided directly invoking the term artificial intelligence, right? This is the buzzword. The event served up a really in-depth exploration into the device's inner workings, with Apple introducing the S9 chip for its Apple Watch Series 9 and Apple Watch Ultra 2, and of course the A17 Pro chip for the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max. Now this is really interesting. A lot of people have been talking about this and criticizing, Apple for kind of their lack of getting in with everything happening in AI. But there's also a whole other side of the coin where people are saying perhaps it's just an optics thing. They don't want to seem like they're just like hopping on the hype bandwagon. It's really interesting because obviously this is a, really big kind of departure from Google and Microsoft right now, who at their conferences have, mentioned there's memes about how many times Google mentions the word AI. And so I think it's really kind of interesting to see that, Apple right now is definitely not kind of towing the line in that regard. They're essentially, I don't know if they mentioned the word AI once at their entire unveiling, which you have to think must have been on purpose. Now, the interesting thing with that is, we're looking the next day, their stock is down 1%. It didn't do great yesterday either. So I think for the last, up until, ever since the launch of that, ever since that event happened, their stock price has been going down. So it wouldn't appear that is, a super positive thing for the company at the moment, perhaps just from an optics level. Now, perhaps it's like a pride thing. They don't want to seem like they're hopping on the whole bandwagon, which I'm not 100% sure what to make of that because, if you look at Microsoft's stock price today, it's up 1.3%. Tesla is up 1.4%. Tesla recently spiked a bunch because the people have been talking about a lot of their AI capabilities and saying they're underrated. Amazon's up. And so it's kind of interesting because a lot of these companies that have been focusing really heavily on AI and promoting AI are seeing stock prices grow. Apple just seems to not want to do that for whatever reason, and it would appear from the Wall Street perspective they're suffering. But that doesn't mean necessarily they're not integrating AI or their products aren't, doing some cool things. So I think really interestingly, Apple kind of shifted its focus from the chips themselves in their products like the iPhone and Apple Watch to the multitude of features that they enable. So take, for example, the S9 chip's ability to process Siri voice requests directly on the device. This is a task typically, relegated to cloud servers. But as semiconductor technology advances, the decentralization of AI processes to the device itself offer a dual advantage, which is faster response times and enhanced data security due to the absence of internet-based transmission, right? Like if all of your data isn't being stored in a cloud, it's a lot, it's theoretically a lot harder for someone to go and hack that cloud and get everyone's data all at once, which was, a problem we've seen a lot. And so what's really interesting is with a lot of these chips that Apple's coming out with, these kind of advanced semiconductors, we are able to start doing a lot of this AI processing directly on the device. Now, of course, they didn't say the word AI, but this is what is happening on these devices. So Apple's kind of, their aversion to discussing AI during their product events or conference calls has led some industry observers to kind of question its standing in the race for AI supremacy. I think Gene Munster, who's a managing partner at Deepwater Asset Management, recently said, quote, "The reality is Apple is aggressively pursuing AI." And he was doing this to kind of, diffuse speculations about Apple's reluctance to capitalize on AI technologies. On another note, the A17 Pro chip, which is the chip behind the iPhone 15 and Pro Max, it stands out as a 3 nanometer semiconductor. So in semiconductor lingo, the nanometer size refers to the dimensions of individual transistors on the chip. So the smaller they are, the more can be packed into the silicone wafer. So this not only bolsters processing power, but also enhances energy efficiency. So in fact, the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max are currently the only smartphones on the market featuring this cutting-edge 3 nanometer technology. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people debating what that means because Apple is kind of notorious for coming up with their own terms for a lot of things and often saying things that have been sort of industry standard, and all of a sudden they add them, and now all of a sudden it's like revolutionary. So, I mean, there's, of course, they added like the USB-C port on the bottom of their phones, like everyone's been doing for ages. And they're talking about like the incredible fast, transfer speeds of them. So anyways, it's just a funny thing. But in any case, I think this marvel of engineering that they're focusing on with these chips, as they call it, I think this will kind of power an array of features requiring AI capabilities, such as predictive typing and advanced camera technologies. So as Munster noted recently, quote, "As more applications that leverage AI emerge, phones will be tasked with powering them, a dynamic that will make phones with legacy chips feel sluggish. Chips are important when it comes to AI, and Apple is leading the way in building the hardware to enable those features." So I think, kind of my take on all of this is that, well, Apple may avoid the spotlight on AI in its public narratives, right? They're not bringing it up for some reason. They have an aversion to the term. The company's hardware innovations really are pushing them in a direction and showing its commitment to integrating artificial intelligence into the user experience, because they're really building their hardware in a way that makes it quite feasible to do a lot of this AI processing directly on the device. And they have a number of different ways that they are actually implementing this. So it's going to be interesting to see if Apple changes their optics, if they feel like, avoiding the word AI, for example, is going to make, bad for their stock price. Something that I feel like Google probably felt the pinch a little ahead of time, and then really turned to focus on AI and has seen a lot of dividends from that. And not just that, but I feel like right now there's a lot of interest in AI. So people call it hype like it's a bad thing, but like I think this is really good. A lot of people that were never interested in this technology before are now all of a sudden curious. They're learning. They're becoming educated. People listening to this podcast, for example, this podcast has absolutely exploded. I started this thing less than a year ago, and this thing is just absolutely exploding with listeners from all over the place. And so I think that this is a really good thing for the industry. And I think, if Apple kind of embraces the term AI and talking about the ways that it's integrated into their technology, people will be super interested and responsive to that. So I think they'll see a lot of positive responses if they embrace it. So hopefully that's something that they do in the future, but definitely something we'll continue to follow.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Thank you for listening to the AI Chat Podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, I'd appreciate it if you rate me wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you're looking for an innovative group of AI enthusiasts, make sure you check out our Discord channel and also our Facebook community. It's obviously a lot more interactive than a podcast where we can actually share software tools, prompts that we're using in everyday AI. I'll leave a link for those in the description below.